Okay.
Okay. Hello viewers, this is Dr. Pooja Kakade from Department of Prosthodontics, MGMDCH, Kamothe. Today we'll be elaborating on the spacer designing. Let me show you the armamentarium first. This is the black rigid bowl containing the hot water, the eosin, hematoxylin and red pencil, carver, maxillary and mandibular cast. These are the spacer, how the spacer box will look like for maxillary and mandibular spacers, and this is the actual spacer of for maxilla and for the mandible. So why first we'll see the why there is a need of a spacer. Spacer will give you a space for your final impression. So the selection of spacer, the material and the technique vary with the patient to patient. So coming to the thickness of the spacer, so the thickness of the spacer will vary according to the type of material you are using for the final impression. If you are using zinc oxide eugenol, then the thickness will vary around 2 mm. For alginate it will be around 3 mm, and for elastomeric impression material it will be around 1.5 mm. So here we are going to see how the actual spacer technique is. So now when it comes to the technique of the spacers, lot of authors has given lot of technique like full spacer, partial spacer which contains I and T spacer, Boucher, Morrow, Rudd and Rhodes, Sherry, then Halperin, Roy, McGregor, Neal, Hartwell and Sheldon. So all this technique needed to be selected according to the condition of the arch of your patient. So if the rugae area and the incisive papilla is prominent, you are supposed to use a double spacer, which first the half spacer will come, on which there will be a full spacer. So to do any spacer designing, you're basically going to need a 3 lines. So the first line will be with lead pencil, which will mark the depth of your sulcus. The second line is going to provide the boundaries of your tray, which will be in H pencil, and the third line will provide the boundaries of your spacer wax, which will be a dotted line using the eosin pencil. So we'll start drawing the lines first. So first of all we are going to draw a sulcus line with the lead pencil. Above that, the 2 mm above will come the line for your tray. And 2 mm above, that means total 4 mm from the sulcus, will come the dotted spacer line. These lines you are supposed to follow all over the boundaries of the cast. So after drawing up the line, the cast is going to look like this. Now coming to the spacer designing for maxilla. So for maxilla we are going to do a double spacer. First we will draw a line for the mushroom spacer, which is also called as a T spacer, which will be in the shape of a mushroom or T, looking like this. And then there will be a line in continuation for the placement of your full spacer, relieving the posterior palatal seat area. Now coming to the maxillary cast. So the maxillary cast will look like this. Now coming to the mandibular cast will look like this. In the same way we are going to put 3 lines on the mandibular cast, relieving the buccal shelp area. So after putting up the line, the cast is going to look like this. So now our casts are ready to receive the spacer wax. First we'll start with the adaptation of maxillary spacer. So to adapt maxillary spacer, we are going to take a maxillary spacer and we will keep it into the hot water till it softens. Once it is softened, we are going to adapt it onto the maxillary cast, starting from the palatal area towards the edges. With the fingers, we are going to mold the wax onto the cast. As the wax is well molded onto the cast, you can see the dotted lines which we already put for the placement of our spacers. So now we are going to cut the spacer along these dotted lines. Like this, you are supposed to continue cutting the spacer wax with the help of lacquer carbon. So after cutting it, so this is how our mushroom spacer will look like. Now on this, onto the mushroom spacer, we are going to adapt the full spacer. Why here I use mushroom type of spacer is because my rugae area and incisive papilla both were prominent. So I have softened the spacer from the palatal area. Slowly start adapting onto the ridge area with your fingers. And then cut it along the dotted line. So after cutting along the dotted line, this is how our spacer is ready. Now coming to the mandibular spacers, we have already the line which will show us the boundaries of our spacer. On this, we are going to take a mandibular spacer. We will soften it into the hot water. Once the wax is softened, adapt it onto the mandibular cast, starting at the midline. With the fingers from upward to downward motion, so that there will not be any fold onto the spacer. Once your spacer is well adapted to the cast, you can see the dotted lines and you are supposed to cut the spacer along the dotted lines. So after cutting it along the dotted line, relieving the buccal shelf area, the spacer is going to look like this.